talking about what our friend, national security analyst Hal Kempfer, and I are going to discuss as well. Diving a little deeper into what exactly is going on here, Hal joins me. Hal, good to see you. Thanks for being with us here. You and I talked late last year after these reports first came out that North Korea was going to be providing Russia munitions, artillery shells, what have you, to use as they fight Ukraine there. And North Korea was going to get a lot out of it, so much so that both Putin and Kim Jong-un met in Russia as well over this, and that was presumably a key agenda item in that summit meeting there late last year. Now, U.S. intelligence suggests that this is happening, that they have found North Korean shells, and we can maybe kind of go into how they identify that. There on the ground in Ukraine that have been used. Hal, what do you make of all this?
Andrew, it's just basically fulfilling what we'd heard before, although the ballistic missile piece was kind of an add-on, a lot more information on that. Of course, one of the things with North Korea is that they've been doing a lot of work and a lot of testing, which has caused a lot of problems, not just for the United States, but for all of our allies in the West Pacific. These constant tests of North Korean ballistic missiles. And so they've been firing these things, in some cases firing them literally right over Japan, over Hokkaido and other areas of Japan, and splashing it in some cases actually in the exclusive economic zone of Japan in those ocean waters. They have that technology. They've been working very hard on this. Something that's not as publicized is the amount of back and forth with Iran. It's not coincidental that Iran also has some very advanced ballistic missile capabilities. North Korea and Iran have been trading information and trading a lot of other things back and forth for many years, and missiles is part of that. So what you're seeing is, along with all the artillery shells and everything else, and there are ways to go back. Once those shells are fired, if you can find remnants, and there usually can find remnants of them, somewhere in there, you're going to find markings on the shell that very much delineate where it came from. And it could be that in some cases they can do metallurgy to figure out where the shell was made as well, because everybody has a little distinctive difference in terms of their composition of whatever their shells or ammunition are. So there is the ability to do that. They have identified those are going in. But and in some cases easier than that, they literally found crates of shells or crates of ammunition that had North Korean markings on them. So you didn't really have to work too hard to figure that one out. But with the ballistic missiles, they have tracked them. They have a unique trajectory, a unique characteristics, and they've clearly seen they've been fired in there. I thought it was kind of interesting that that Admiral Kirby brought up that the one that we tracked all the way through had landed in an empty field. It's not often you hear them get a little dig in like that, and there was a little dig in, which went into that, which was you took this thing all the way across, Siberia and got in there, and then you hit an empty field. Way to go! Okay. So there was a little bit of that kind of implied, and they said we're assessing where the rest of them went and stuff. Okay. But it is a big concern. Now, if I may just real quick, the other thing is North Korea has a lot of old conventional munitions, conventional stuff, and they've been needing that desperately. So they get something out of this deal as well.
Yeah, Hal, we're showing still more video of the damage wrought there in Ukraine. Just more on this, to your point, John Kirby said that Russian forces fired at least one of those ballistic missiles into Ukraine on December 30th, and it landed in an open field in the Zaporizhia region as well. Also, we know Russia launched multiple North Korean ballistic missiles on Tuesday as part of an overnight attack. The missiles have a range, like you said, Hal, of about 550 miles. U.S. intelligence officials believe, to what we've been discussing, that North Korea, in return for its arms support, wants Russia to provide it with aircraft, surface-to-air missiles, armored vehicles, ballistic missile production equipment, and other advanced technologies. Hal, what about the other side of the bargain here? Are we going to get intelligence to suggest that Russia has held up their side of the deal?
Andrew, that's an interesting question, and that's been discussed ever since this deal was announced. Ever since Kim Jong-un took that famous armored rail car ride over to Vladivostok to shake Putin's hand, the question will be, how will Russia really reciprocate? And the reason is Russia's industrial base, its defense or military industrial base, is kind of stretched, just meeting its own requirements for the war in Ukraine. And it was kind of questionable how much they would have on top of that that they could send over to North Korea. Now, frankly, North Korea is really it's not flatlined, but its economic system is in a horrible situation, and they're desperate for any lifeline they can get. So this deal of sending ballistic missiles over, even if there's a long lag before they ever get anything back, it's about all they have. So they want to make sure that they keep something open, something they can point to. And of course, Kim Jong Un is probably more concerned about the appearance of having a deterrent force in the Korean Peninsula or an offensive force than the actual capability of that offensive force.
Okay.
So he wants to make it look like that. So there is something they get out of it, tangible, really making a difference on the North Korean peninsula from a battlefield mathematics thing. I don't know if they're going to get that much that soon that'll change the way it is.
I see.
But it does provide something. Yeah.
Okay, Hal, as well, I want to put up this shot of the White House here. I want to talk with you about something that has been brewing in the works. We haven't been able to discuss it yet here on Live Now from Fox. It is directly related to the war in Ukraine. This is reporting from Fox Business correspondent Edward Lawrence. He says this: the Biden administration is pushing a plan to confiscate $300 billion in Russian seized assets. Now, those assets are frozen and were frozen in the first weeks of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The United States has a small percent of those frozen assets, about 5%. Most of it is in Europe. A source tells Edward Lawrence that is why all the G7 countries must agree and act at the same time. So there is a concerted effort right now, Hal, being led by the United States to get our Western allies, especially there in Europe, on board to take these seized, I believe they're Russian central bank assets that are frozen right now as we speak, and use them in some capacity, possibly to help Ukraine fight off Russian aggression. Now, there was some discussions to say maybe we should do this and give the money to Ukraine to rebuild after the war is all said and done. But this has never been done before. This is why we're talking about it. It's very unprecedented. We don't even know what it would look like if all of these partners agree to do it and what the Russian response would be as well. What do you make of this? Do you think they're going to be successful? Do you think it's actually going to happen?
Well, what we got today shows that there is some momentum in this move. What I should mention is that there's been a working group in the G7 for months and months, really going back pretty much almost the duration of the war, on what to do with these seized assets. What direction should they go, and also get into the particulars. When you get into it, it really boils down to the Russian central bank, and all central banks do this: is they maintain certain amount of reserves in foreign currency. U.S. dollars is the dominant reserve currency across the world. And there is a substantial, it's not most of it, but there is a substantial percentage, as you mentioned, that is in US dollars. A much larger percentage is in euros. There's actually a significant percentage, interestingly enough, that's in pound sterling, British pound sterling. And then a smaller amount is in Swiss francs. But there is this huge amount, and there's also other things like gold and other assets that are in this as well, other more tangible assets, not just currency. The concern is, and I'll give you both sides. The one side is, it appears to be consensus among the G7 leaders that this is something they could do, and this would put a lot of funding at Ukraine's behest that they could use in fighting the war and keeping the Russians at bay while they're dealing with issues such as the veto by Orban in Hungary within the European Union, and while President Biden's dealing with Congress and the ability to get that funding pushed, that maybe they could push this along. Even the threat of doing that, it gives them a little bit of momentum. The bad side of this, the other side, is it has never been done before.
Right.
And there's been a lot of things. In fact, we just did a Strap podcast not too long ago talking about the fact that the U.S. reserve currency status was basically in peril around the world, and there was a lot of concern that they were moving toward, certainly China wants to move to another currency. Russia desperately wants to move to another currency, to move to some sort of other reserve currency. And historically, this happened. It used to be pound sterling was the dominant reserve currency.
Sure.
Then it became U.S. dollars. Not sure what the future holds. U.S. dollars will still maintain that. But if they do this, the concern is that every central bank in the world is going to look at this and say, do we really want to maintain a large amount of our reserves in U.S. dollars, in U.S. bank? Do we want to do that? Because if we do, they could do this to us should something go awry in the future. And so there is a concern on the more on the financial treasury side of what the implications are on that. However, at this point, the war's gone on for 2 years. Everybody's got a chance to see what Russia's all about with this. It's not going to be a quick reverse. So I think there's a lot of momentum that's like, look, if not now, when?
Okay.
And so that's what you're hearing.
Yeah, to your point, Hal, Edward Lawrence says this, that the disagreement amongst members of the G7 comes with those countries concerned that the other members of the G7 could arbitrarily decide to seize assets from another G7 member or another country in the world. So it'll create kind of this slippery slope where everyone will do it if we all decide to do it for Russian seized assets as well. Hal, stay with us. We're going to take a quick commercial break, though. When we come back, we'll be diving into all the latest developments in the Middle East, the Israel-Hamas war. We're getting more details about who might have perpetrated this deadly attack there in Iran, and how the Houthis continue to attack vessels in the Red Sea. We'll see everyone in 2 minutes.